In this movie, we'll introduce the mouth and the teeth, both of which we'll fill with good old radial gradients. All right, so I'll go ahead and switch over to my document in progress. And then I'll go up to the Object menu and choose Show All, or press Control-Alt-3 or Command-Option-3 on the Mac in order to bring up my final path outlines. Notice we only have the right half of the shapes, so go ahead and select the Reflect tool, which you can get by pressing the O key, and then Alt-click or Option-click on that vertical guideline in order to bring up the Reflect dialog box. If you're working along with me, your axis should still be set to vertical, which is exactly what we want. So go ahead and click the Copy button in order to create those extra paths. All right, now we need to join them together. So press the V key in order to switch back to the black arrow tool, and then click on the right half of the mouth and Shift-click on the left half in order to select both open path outlines. Then go up to the Object menu, choose Path, and choose Join, or you can press Control-J or Command-J on the Mac. And just to make sure things have worked properly, I'll press the A key to switch to the wide arrow tool, and then I'll click on that anchor point to select it, and I'll drag it, and sure enough, we now have a fused anchor point and a single closed path outline. Problem is, if I drag a control handle, you can see that we have a cusp point instead of a smooth point, which is not what I want. So I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac a couple of times in order to undo those changes. And then I'll Shift-click on this anchor point down here at the bottom, and I'll go up to the second icon up here in the control panel, which allows me to convert the points to smooth points. And just to demonstrate that that has worked, I'll click on this top point again, and I will drag one of the control handles, and you can see that the other control handle moves in the opposite direction. All right, I'll go ahead and undo that change, and then I'll Alt-click or Option-click on this path outline to select the entire thing, and I'll Shift-Alt or Shift-Option-click on the right half to select it as well. And then I'll press Control-J or Command-J on the Mac to join the paths together, and now I'll click on this anchor point and Shift-click on this one, and then I'll convert both of those to smooth points by clicking on the second icon up here in the control panel. And just to make sure it worked, I'll go ahead and select this anchor point and I'll drag its control handle. And sure enough, everything's exactly the way it should be. All right, now I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And we need to round the corners of the paths. So I'll go ahead and Alt-click or Option-click on the path that represents the mouth so that we can see these corner widgets on either side. But rather than dragging on them, I'll just go ahead and change the corners value up here in the control panel to 10 points. Then I'll Alt or Option-click on this path outline, the one that represents the teeth, in order to select it. And I'll change the corners value at first to 8 points, and then I'll click on this bottom right widget and Shift-click on the bottom left one, and I'll increase the corners value to 16 points, like so. All right, now I'll go ahead and press the V key to switch back to the black arrow tool, and I'll click on the path outline for the mouth. And for the most part, it needs to be stroked and filled like the eyes. And so I'll go ahead and grab my eyedropper tool, which once again you can get by pressing the I key. And then I'll click on one of the eyes to lift its fill and stroke attributes. But notice things didn't work out quite right. First of all, the stroke's on top of the fill. And secondly, the stroke, which is twirled open, is lacking its transform effect. And so if you want to bring over all the appearance attributes, what you have to do is press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to bring up the Eyedropper Options dialog box, and then turn on the Appearance checkbox in the left-hand list and click OK. And now if you once again click on the eye, you'll see that the fill and stroke are in their proper locations and the transform effect has been restored. Unfortunately, we have a hard edge around the stroke, and that's because for whatever reason, it's going in a wrong direction. So go ahead and select the stroke here inside the gradient panel and click on the reverse gradient icon in order to make the stroke go from opaque inside the shape to transparent on the outside edge. All right, now click on the word transform associated with the stroke here inside the appearance panel. And this is a very slight change. We're just going to take the horizontal value up to 99% and then click OK. And that's just going to make the stroke a little wider at the outside edges of the mouth. Now we need to adjust the fill. And to do that, go ahead and click on the fill icon here inside the gradient panel and change the type from radial to linear, like so. And then we want the angle value to be 90 degrees. So the gradient is going from bright at the bottom to dark at the top. All right, now if you press Control-Y or Command-Y on the Mac, you're going to see that we have some even brighter brown going on inside the mouth. The thing is, though, if I were to click right now with the eyedropper, I'm not going to get that color. And by the way, I would mess up my selected path outline. So I'll press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac to deselect the path. And then notice, if I click right here, instead of getting a shade of brown for the fill, which is currently active, I get nothing. Both the fill and the stroke turn to none. And that's because I turned on that appearance checkbox. So it changes the behavior of the eyedropper, but there's a way to get it back, and that's to press the Shift key as you click. So if you Shift click, whether that appearance checkbox is turned on or not, you should get the color directly underneath your cursor. And so just remember that in the future, if the eyedropper does you wrong, because it has been known to change its behavior over time, a Shift click should set it right. All right, now let's go ahead and save that new brown as a swatch by clicking on a little page icon at the bottom of the swatches panel. And I'll just go ahead and call this guy Brown 4. And then I'll turn on the global checkbox, switch to the HSB sliders, tab my way to the hue value, change it to 35 degrees, and then change the saturation value to 85%, and I'll change the brightness value to 75%, and click OK. And as long as I'm here, I want to lift this really dark brown under the teeth, and so I will once again Shift-click in order to select it, and you can see I now have a new shade of brown here in the swatches panel. Then I'll click on the little page icon at the bottom of the panel. I'll call this guy Brown 5, turn on the global checkbox, switch to HSB, tab to my hue value, take it up to 40%. Saturation value is already 100%, which is what I want. And then I'll set the brightness value to 20% and click OK. All right, now I'll take these two new swatches here, click on one, Shift-click on the other, and drag them to the end of the emoji folder in order to move them into that group. All right, now press the V key to switch back to the black arrow tool and press Control-Y or Command-Y on the Mac to switch to the preview mode, and then go ahead and click on the mouth to select it. All right, now I'm going to click on this color stop right there, here inside the gradient panel, and I'm going to take the location value up to 60%, and then I'll grab Brown 4, the brightest of the browns, and drag it and drop it onto the gradient, and I'm going to change its location value to 30% in order to produce this effect here. All right, now we need to fill the teeth, so go ahead and select that path. Get rid of the stroke by clicking on the second swatch icon up here in the control panel and changing it to none. And then make sure your fill is active here inside the gradient panel and select white black to start with. And that's obviously not the effect we're looking for, but it will be in a moment when you drag this shade of gray, the one in which all the values are 179. Go ahead and drag this guy and drop it onto the black color stop to replace it. Then select the white color stop and change its location value to 50%, so it's right there in the middle, and then Alt or Option drag the gray color stop from the far right-hand side to the far left-hand side of the gradient. And you will end up with this effect here. All right, now I'll press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac to deselect my artwork. And just for the sake of comparison here, I'll press Control-Y or Command-Y on the Mac so that we can see the tracing template, complete with a vertical gradient inside the mouth and a horizontal gradient across the teeth, compared with the effect that we've produced so far. And that is how you make the most of a couple of old-school linear gradients, which are still as great as they ever were, here inside Illustrator.